All right, so we are going to continue our distance learning this week with Chapter 6b. Chapter 6b is noun and adjective agreement, which we have been doing all along since Spanish 1, and also affirmative to commands. Now, noun and adjective agreement, remember that there's two important things to remember when we use adjectives. Number one is that adjectives always follow the nouns. They always come after the noun. So if you're saying the red house, remember that it's la casa roja. Okay, we're not going to say the red house in Spanish. It's actually the house red. The second thing is you always have to remember that unlike in English, our adjectives always have to agree with the nouns in both gender and number. So just like that, when I said the red house, I said roja because la casa is feminine and singular. If it was plural, it would be las casas rojas. And then again, if I was talking about a red masculine item, such as el lápiz, it would be el lápiz rojo. Okay? So always make sure that your color in this chapter, it's pretty much going to be colors. Make sure that your colors agree with the item that they're describing. It's the most important thing to remember. Now we have some generic rules for gender of adjectives. Typically masculine adjectives will end in an O or an R. For example, gracioso, alto, trabajador. And feminine adjectives will typically end in an A or an RA. So graciosa, alta, trabajadora. And then we have a couple neutral adjectives, which you'll see will end in E, L, or ISTA. And examples being inteligente, fácil, or deportista. So number of nouns and adjectives, in order to make a noun or adjective plural, if it ends in a vowel, we added S. So libro becomes libros. If we're talking about our bed, cama becomes camas. If it ends in a consonant, we add ES. For example, cartel, which is poster, would be carteles if we're talking about more than one. And if it ends in a Z, we change the Z to a C and add ES. We don't have many of these. You have lápiz, which is lápices, and that's pretty much the primary one that you'll use. Some practice. I threw in some noun and adjective agreement in here, such as red carpet. Remember, it's going to be alfombra roja, black alarm clock, el despertador negro. Okay, and here are the answers to these four. I'll give you a second to copy these. You can also just pause this. Yo tengo una alfombra roja y está. Remember, we're talking about location. It's always the verb estar. Okay, this chapter, anytime you say like the lamp is next to the bed, it's going to be the verb estar. If it's one item, so the lamp is next to the bed, it's going to be está. If it was plural, like the lamps are next to the bed, it's going to be están. So we have yo pongo las cortinas verdes a la derecha de las ventanas grandes. 3 is las ventanas pequeñas están al lado de la puerta marrón. Y número 4, la puerta morada está delante de mi cama rosada. So since that was just a review, I'm not going to harp on it, but do know that you need to know that for this chapter. The project you're doing, you're creating a house for sale, and you have to describe the rooms. So remember, the adjectives come at the end after the noun, and remember to make them agree. Okay? Moving on to affirmative to commands. Affirmative to commands are commands that the example I always use is if your mom is telling you to clean your house. That's what we're going to be using our affirmative to commands with. This chapter is household chores. We're going to touch on this a little bit this week and a little bit more next week. Affirmative to commands are things like if your mother says, clean your room, set the table, do your homework, take out the trash. These are all considered commands. So affirmative to commands are phrases you use when telling someone to do something. Since they are to commands, you can only use them with people that you would use the to form with. So for example, you can't give your mom, who would be usted, an affirmative to command. It's pretty much a parent to kid or even teacher to student. If I said, get out your notebooks, take out a pencil, Those are all also commands. And again, as I just said, they're used when talking to people who you are familiar with, such as friends, family, or people the same age or younger than you. The affirmative to command is so easy to form. All you do is put the verb in the él, ella, usted form. Okay, so although it's called, the only confusing part is it's called a to command, but it's not the to form. Okay, the affirmative to command is the él, ella, usted form of the verb. So if I have the verb hablar and I want to yell at you and say talk on the phone, I would just say habla por teléfono. Okay, so all you do is take the él, ella, usted form of the verb. Now you're not going to say the él, ella, usted. You're just going to say the verb. So habla would mean if I was yelling at you or directing you to talk. And the word you is implied in these phrases, so you're not going to write to either. There's not going to be a subject for these. You're just going to start with the command. Since the command form and the third person singular conjugations are the same, you will know the difference between a command and a statement by the use of a comma. So for example, if I say Juan lava el carro, I'm saying Juan washes the car. If you hear me say Juan lava el carro, you know that I'm yelling at Juan and directing him to wash the car. So look for a comma if there is a name listed. Here's some practice. And here are your answers. So dar is going to be da, ayuda, arregla, lava, come, escribe. Okay. Not that you're supposed to learn it this way, but one of the tricks is for most of these, the él, ella, usted form is just dropping the R. So for example, dar without the R is da, ayudar without the R, ayuda. So a lot of them it works that way. It doesn't always work that way, but for a lot of them it does. And then at the bottom we have 3 examples. Hija, da de comer al perro ahora. Juan, come tu cena. And lava la ropa y arregla tu dormitorio. As with everything in Spanish, of course, there are irregulars. So we do have some irregular affirmative commands. Some of these words will follow a pattern. Most of them are actually yogo verbs. So again, from last chapter. When you have yogo verbs, to form affirmative to commands, all you do is chop off the go from the yo form. So for example, tengo, okay, the command is just 10. Ir and ser are not yogo verbs, but they are irregular in affirmative to commands. Also, traer is a yogo verb, but it is not irregular as an affirmative to command. Here is your chart. So all the way to the right, you have the affirmative command. Haz, ve, di, pon, sal, se, ten, and ven are your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 irregulars. And you can pause this to copy out this chart. Here's some practice. And again, these are practice with the irregulars. So notice, pon la mesa, ten tu tarea, ven aquí, sal ahora, pon la mesita, haz tus quehaceres, ve a tu cuarto. Okay, and that's all we will be doing for this week. Next week, I'm going to add a little bit onto this, but for some reason, this tends to be complicated, even though it shouldn't be. So after you finish this, I have a short quizzes on it. And then you are going to do your house for sale projects, which I did include an example of a student from last year. So you can make yours, model yours off of that. Hers was an A+. Just use the rubric I provided and go straight down the checklist. As long as you have everything in there, you will get an A. Again, questions, comments, concerns, email me or send me a message on Remind.